Kwame Brown, who is obviously in the media spotlight right now, was the number one pick of the 2001 NBA draft. He was one of the best high school prospects of all time. He was drafted number one for a reason. However, there is another player who not a lot of people know about, who was actually once considered the consensus number one pick of the 2001 NBA draft at one point, and his name is Loren Woods. Loren Woods was once considered one of, if not the top center prospect in the country, and one of the top center prospects in many years, who was compared to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar by NBADraft.net. Now, I am not putting that on Loren Woods. I think NBADraft.net comparing a college, high school, or any other center to the top scorer in NBA history is at the least completely irresponsible. But let's go through what happened with Loren Woods. So, he was a stud high school player. He was a third-team All-American in 1996. And let's just take a quick rundown at what led up to him being a number one potential pick. He played his freshman and sophomore years at Wake Forest, behind Tim Duncan his freshman year. And then he played more solid as a sophomore. But after that, he was just kind of sick of things at Wake Forest, and he decided to transfer to Arizona. As you see here, his sophomore year in 98, he averaged 8.8 points a game, 7.1 rebounds, and 2.3 blocks. However, after that, because of the comparisons to Tim Duncan, who's obviously one of the greatest college and NBA players ever, he wanted to get out of that spotlight and transferred to Arizona, where he was an absolute stud in the 2000 season, averaging over 15.7 rebounds and 3 blocks a game, shooting 53.8% from the field, as Arizona won the Pac-12, although they would lose in the round of 32. And he was on a team filled with studs like Gilbert Arenas and Richard Jefferson. And most crazy, in February 2000, he had 14 blocks in a game against Oregon, tying the NCAA record. Giving some more background here from an article in February 2000, he was the leader of an Arizona team with multiple future pros. And for some more context, at the time, Woods, who was 7'1", said, "I'm never going to be a player that's so strong, a power player. That's not the strength of my game at all, but I've definitely gotten stronger and it's helped me." Keep that in mind, because that is going to be a very, very crucial part later in this story. And as his head coach at the time, Lute Olson, said, a year from now, he could be a candidate for Player of the Year. So that just shows you what his reputation was at the time. His coach said that most NBA scouts told him in the 2000 draft that he would be a likely lottery pick, maybe a little bit outside, but again, his reputation was through the roof at this point. However, he decided to return for the 2001 season. As he said, "By me coming back, I'll definitely be a better player, but I think I'll also be a better person. By me growing up and maturing in a year, it will be a huge difference than if I would have gone to that level. This year, I'll definitely be more mature after another year." Going further, he had missed the final 7 games of the season due to an injury, and pretty much everyone at Arizona wanted him to come back because they were going to be projected to be the number one team in the nation the next year. But Woods actually said he did not make his mind up until about 40 minutes before the decision was to be made. And if he had entered the 2000 NBA draft, it is highly probable that he very well could have been a first-round pick with his size at 7'1" and his shot-blocking ability. He had talked with several NBA general managers who did tell him he's going to be one of the top picks in the draft, but that he needed to improve. And again, this comes back around to the summer of 2000 when he was compared to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, which led to very high expectations heading into 2001, where here he was projected in August 2000 as the number one pick of the entire draft. Now, we are going to see how these mock drafts for 2001 changed over the course of the season. By October, he had fallen to number 2, but that's because Yao Ming had come on the scene, who likely would have entered the 2001 draft if not for some factors outside of basketball. That's definitely a very interesting what if. Skipping ahead to November, still the projected number 2 pick. Yao Ming's the number 1 pick, but again, his reputation was still high, and he was still projected to be a very, very high pick. Now we skip to January. He had fallen to 7th by this time, and then by April he had fallen to 10th, and then by May he had fallen to 11th. So what happened here? Well, players like Gilbert Arenas, who obviously ended up being a stud NBA, stepped up, so the Arizona team was more balanced, and he kind of regressed. He averaged 13.2 points a game his last year, but along with 2.9 blocks a game, so it's not like he was a complete dud. And he did make the 2001 NCAA All-Tournament team, like games like this in the first round where he had 17 points, 9 rebounds, and 6 blocks. In the Sweet 16, he had 16 points and 11 rebounds. His best game of the tournament came in the Elite Eight against Illinois, where he had 18.7 blocks and 5 rebounds, and then in the national championship against Duke, one of the best college teams of all time. Although Arizona lost, he had 22 points, 11 rebounds, and 4 blocks. And this is some Loren Woods footage against the Elite Eight game I mentioned when he played against Illinois, and he was a crucial part in Arizona being able to win this game. You see his size at 7'1", how he was able to tower over college defenders, and his skill set. So what happened from here? Well, here's an article from the New York Times in March of 2001 where in that Illinois game, Illinois fans were chanting CBA at Loren Woods, taunting him. And as a scout said, if you were drafting for an NBA team, would Loren Woods be the guy who could solve your center problems? Is he going to physically be able to defend Shaquille O'Neal or David Robinson? Loren Woods has shown that he doesn't want to play a physical game down low. He just doesn't do it, which ties back into what we said earlier, where the year before Loren Woods literally said verbatim, he is never going to be a physical player. Another scout said if he had his preference, it would be to float around the high post and maybe take a jump hook or get fouled. There aren't many teams that can draft a 7-footer to do that. And before the semifinals, another scout was asked how far Woodstock could plummet, and they said Antarctica. That's not good. In this season, he had been suspended the first 6 games of the year, and he had a slow start, but he did have a great NCAA tournament. To be fair, he was an absolute stud for Arizona in the NCAA tournament, and NBA Draft.net still had him as a projected lottery pick at the time, but there is clearly more beneath the surface. One scout even said that he was a 7'1" small forward, which is funny because that actually would have been an asset like 10 years later, but it was not in 2001 as he fell to the 46th overall pick to the Minnesota Timberwolves. But the Timberwolves were excited to get him. Head coach Flip Saunders said at the time he's 7'1" in bare feet and 245 pounds. We were fortunate to get him. This was an interesting situation because Minnesota had their first round picks forfeited for a few years, so they were swinging for the fences with their second round pick, and as Saunders said himself, they had him rated in the first round as a first round prospect, so they said picking him was a no-brainer. And in terms of his NBA story, that's pretty much where it ends because he only averaged 2.6 points a game, although he did start 30 games for the Toronto Raptors in 2005, and he did try to make a comeback for the Cavs in 2010, as you can see here, but he did not make the roster, and then ended up playing in Iran for 8 years of all places, and even became a Lebanese citizen in 2013, and his professional career actually lasted until 2018. But Loren Woods is definitely an interesting story. He was a 7'1" stud who was compared to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, like literally, we've shown you that, and he had an incredible junior season. He would have been a lottery pick. He did have some back surgeries before the 2000 draft, but I think even with that, with how weak the 2000 draft was, he probably would have made that first round money. He probably could have been drafted by an NBA team that maybe could have developed him. However, he chose to come back for his senior year, and his stock plummeted as his weaknesses were shown more on display. But from going from the potential projected unanimous number 1 overall pick to falling to the second round to the 46th pick in a span of a few months, it's honestly one of the craziest draft stories I've seen. It's not really talked about, And watching him play, I mean, he was a 7'1" guy. He was incredible at blocking shots, but at the time, he even openly said he was never going to be a physical player, and he never did become a physical player. And the funny thing is, like 10 years later, with how his skills were at the time, in like 2012, you think of a guy like Anthony Davis who kind of had a similar skill set, although Davis was more physical, to be fair. But at the time in like 2012, 2013, say he would have came out a few years later, I think he probably would have been a lottery pick then with this skill set, even at his age, because he was a fifth-year senior. But the thing is, in the early 2000s, you had guys like Shaq, Tim Duncan, Karl Malone. You had all these huge, strong guys in the post. And in this case, the scouts' concerns were right. I mean, Loren Woods openly said he was never going to be a physical player, and you've got some of the most physical centers in NBA history in the league at the time, and in a few seasons in the NBA, he averaged less than 3 points a game. But it's still one of the more intriguing stories that I wanted to bring to the forefront. I hope Loren Woods is doing well now, and it's just one of the craziest draft stories I've ever heard in history.